Hello whisky fans, we've got our malternative with us here today. This is an affordable kind of entry-level product, and apologies that this is probably going to be another one that's only going to be available to you whisky fans here in the UK. This is another M&S product, and it's a 5-year-old XO French brandy. So I decided to go for this one because I reviewed their, I think it was also £18. They had an 8-year-old blended Scotch whisky at M&S, and I really liked that one. I thought that it had a 42% ABV, fair amount of character, nice and smooth. You kind of get what you paid for, good value stuff. So I thought I'd give this similarly packaged and presented 5-year-old brandy a try. So brandy, what is brandy? So the short answer to that is that it's an eau de vie, so a distilled spirit drink made from distilled wine. Did you know that the word brandy is actually a shortened form of the term brandy wine, which in Dutch means burnt wine? You do know. So the term brandy itself, without the wine part, actually literally means burnt. So that's obviously a reference to the heating part of the distillation process. Details on the label of this one: it's a French product and it's got a 5-year-old age statement. I'll just show you a close-up of the label. And it's also got that XO on the label. Anyone that's purely a whiskey drinker might not understand what that means, but since 1983, XO has legally meant that the product that is affixed to has to be at least 6 years old. But with this one, the label also says 5 years old, so there's kind of something wrong there. It's absolutely nothing new, especially in the whiskey world, to see a whiskey with a number on the label which is secretly younger than what you actually get in the bottle. Sometimes distilleries will do that when they kind of haven't got a name for themselves and they want to make one, and they want to put out some older stock at a lower age and price point to impress people. Sometimes distilleries put older stuff in the bottle to give them that flexibility further on down the road if they need to put a younger batch under that expression in future. But you don't really get that flexibility if your younger age statement contradicts something else on the label. So that is a little bit of an odd one. But technicality probably doesn't really mean anything. Just a clumsy label, probably. But presentation for this one, I quite like the bottle. It's obviously very similar to that 8-year-old blended Scotch whisky that we had. And nice little wooden cork closure on the top. Or is it? There's a little bit of a trick, a little bit deceptive there. Wood effect, looks like a stopper, but it is actually a screw top. Not that that really matters, especially not for an £18 product. So let's get some in the glass and see how bad it can be. Rest of the details on this before I forget: it is 40%, aged and blended in France, and there are some other details on the back which I will come to later. So, colour of that looks artificial. It's very orange, looks a bit fake tan. But on the nose, you can definitely tell that there's some fruit in there. Obvious grape, sort of grape and blackcurrant notes on the nose. In particular, I'd say that there's a note of grape must, so kind of the pressed grape skins that you get from the winemaking process. A little bit of a Ribena note, as well as quite an artificial sweetness. It's kind of reminiscent of grape-flavoured cola soft drinks. Grape syrup. Also a little bit of a bitter chalkiness on the nose, which reminds me a little bit of those chalky Love Heart sweets. Let's see how it tastes. Obvious notes of red grape and slight plumminess on the palate, but also quite a bitter medicinal quality. And again, that kind of forced artificial sugariness, kind of like the sugariness that you get on marzipan. And that's really not surprising, and I think that this is all down to the fact that when you look on the back label of this, thank you to M&S for this wonderful back label where we actually have something that's quite rare in the spirits and drinks industry. We have ingredients. So the ingredients on this one, as always in the UK, they're listed in order of volume. So the first ingredients have to be the ones that make up the larger percentage of what's in there. The ingredients in this one are brandy, demineralized water, so that's obviously to bring it down to bottling strength, sugar, and colour, plain caramel. So our suspicions before that this was artificially coloured are bang on the money. This has E150A spirit caramel added to it, which is why you've got that horrible Tango Tizer orange fake tan colour. But more interesting than that is the fact that this stuff lists sugar as one of the ingredients. Now, the reason why that's in there, because it seems very odd to us whiskey drinkers, is because brandy, unlike scotch, is allowed to be artificially sweetened in the same way that a lot of other spirits, like in particular rum, can be. Now, I believe, this is just off the top of my head, so I may get it a little bit wrong, but I think brandy, by EU law, you're allowed to have, I think it's 36 grams of sugar per litre. I can't remember if that's litre of finished product or litre of ethanol, but either way, let's just take a moment to think about that. 36 grams, that's probably like a small handful of sugar per litre of brandy. That's a hell of a lot. It's probably actually around about a third of the sugar content of something like Coca-Cola, and fair enough. Most of us aren't going to sit down and drink a whole pint of this stuff like you might do Coca-Cola, but it's still a hell of a lot of nasty additives that don't belong in a quality spirit. Can you tell that this stuff has been sweetened? In my opinion, you can. And it's not a good thing. So, going back to the palate, let's have another little sip. Wine gums, again, which is kind of an artificially sweet tasting note, isn't it? Wine gums. It's something that I'm seeing a lot these days in STR casks, STR red wine. Also getting some burnt toffee on the late palate of this one, and some burnt grape. And also, sadly, and probably down to the fact that this stuff is only 40%, whereas the M&S blended scotch is 42%, this brandy is slightly thin. As for the finish, short, thin, grape syrup and wine gums, but really the flavours that you get on the late palate and the finish of this one, they are gone quickly, and that's not necessarily such a bad thing. So, final verdict for this M&S 5 or possibly 6-year-old French brandy. It's got some good points to it. It's fruity and jammy and playful and pleasant, but it's also artificially sweet and thin in a way that's kind of worse than even the most underpowered scotch. And I do wonder if that's possibly because there's no maltiness backing up the body of this. I might be a little biased there, but I do think that distilled barley spirit is kind of the king of distilled drinks. So, final verdict for this one. As for a grade, I'm going to go with a D+, so that's just below what I would call good. I think that this is an enjoyable drink, but it's probably not worth the £18, and brandy as a category has so much more to offer than this. And I personally probably wouldn't buy this one again, and once it's gone, I'm probably not going to miss it. So, final question for you guys, replying to me in the comments, what is your brandy or cognac or armagnac of choice? Because I am really looking into my alternatives more and more seriously these days, and any good recommendations are more than welcome. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know what you thought of it if you have had it, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.